Well, hey guys, Ben Potter here, and today I am completely redoing my Big Pedalboard. Now, there's several reasons why I'm doing this. When I designed this board, I designed it to be kind of a jack-of-all-trade board. So I wanted to put the pedals on here that inspired me the most, but also wanted to be able, if I'm doing blues rock stuff, be able to do that. If I'm doing praise and worship stuff, be able to do that. If I'm using a Les Paul or a Telly or a Strat, be able to cover all of those bases. And this board has done a really good job at doing that. There's a wide variety of tones that I can get with this. But a couple things have happened since then. So earlier this year, I was asked to play electric guitar with a worship team that was going to be leading worship at a conference. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that event because of my work schedule. But it kind of got my wheels thinking. This would have been the board that I would have taken to do that. And so I kind of started thinking, if I was going to build kind of my ultimate praise and worship board, what exactly would that look like? Another thing that happened is I started thinking about how when I'm at home, I play a lot of blues rock stuff with my Strat, and then I go to church and play a lot of praise and worship stuff. And praise and worship music is really what got me into playing electric guitar, and it's probably where my skill set lies the most. And so I'd kind of like to spend a little bit more time playing that style of music and kind of refining that craft a little bit more at home. Not that I plan to stop playing blues and rock stuff, and not that there's anything wrong with playing that, but I'd like to just kind of dedicate a little bit more to that. So those two things kind of got me thinking, if I was going to redo this board and still be able to get some of those blues rock tones and stuff that I love, but also maybe tailor it a little bit more towards praise and worship stuff, what exactly would that look like? Another thing that happened is the power supply for my HX Stomp stopped working about a week ago. And so typically with this board, the HX Stomp has been powered by the power supply that came with it, and everything else on here is powered with a one-spot daisy chain, with the exception of the Sunface, which is being powered by just a regular battery. And so I've been using the one-spot daisy chain since I built my first pedal board probably 8 or 9 years ago, and it's worked great. I've had very little issues with it. The only time that I've really had some issues with it is if I've used like my Line 6 M5 with it with other pedals, then I've run into a few noise issues. But other than that, I haven't really had much of a problem with it. But I've been kind of annoyed at the fact that I have two different power leads coming out of this pedal board, one for the Stomp and then another one for everything else. And you know, you hear a lot about how isolated power is cleaner and stuff like that. So with all of those things happening, I've purchased the one-spot CS12, which is True Tone's isolated power supply that has 12 outputs on it and will deliver up to 300 milliamps of current. So I'm going to be mounting that underneath this board and using that to power everything. Now this has 12 power jacks on it. One of them is an AC power jack, and none of my pedals take AC power. So that really only leaves me with 9. And then 2 of those outlets are 18 volts, and then other ones of them can be switched between 9 and 12 volts. And some of the pedals on this board can run at 18 volts, but I wasn't sure if I would like them at 18 volts or not. So I also went ahead and purchased 2 of these 18 to 9 volts converters that you can use with the power supply to take those 18 volt jacks and drop them down to 9 volts. And my thought was, I'll try some of these pedals at 18 volts, and if I like it, great. If I don't like it, I already have what I need to run them at 9 volts. And even if I end up liking them at 18 volts, I'll still keep the adapters, because in the future, if I do something different with the board or whatever, who knows what I might need. Now, I've already pulled the power supply out of the box and done a little bit of testing, and one of the pedals I am going to run at 18 volts, and another one of the pedals, the Prince of Tone, I'm going to keep at 9 volts. So that's another thing that's going to happen. A few pedal changes are going to take place. So first of all, with praise and worship music, I want to be able to do some swells and stuff. And yes, you can do that with the volume knob, but it's a little bit easier, arguably, to do it with a volume pedal. So I'm going to be putting my VP Junior on the board. I've already taken the feet off of the back, so this is going to be going on. Also, with praise and worship stuff, I like to use a compressor. I don't really use compressors with blues rock stuff, but for praise and worship stuff, especially if I'm playing clean, maybe like single line stuff with some delays and reverbs, a compressor, because what it can do is it can take your soft signal and make it louder, and your loud signals and make it softer. The compressor will take, if you're playing kind of some soft single line clean stuff, it will lift those notes up and kind of help them sit in the mix a little bit better. So I own two compressor pedals. One is the MXR Custom Comp, which is on my little board that I use at church when I'm leading worship. The other one that I have is this DOD FX80B compressor sustainer that my dad gave me. It is probably about as old as I am, but I've sprayed some deoxit on the pots and am going to be putting this on the board, and hopefully that's going to work for me. The last kind of thing that I'm going to be putting on the board is I like to use kind of a mid-pushed overdrive with praise and worship stuff. Kind of cuts through the mix a little bit. And so on my board that I use at church, I use the Full Tone Full Drive 2, which is kind of based on a tube screamer, but has some different clipping options and stuff like that. This is sort of in a similar vein. This is the Shelly Guitars Od Overdrive, also based on a tube screamer, but has some modes in it. I like to use it in the flat EQ mode, which still boosts the mids, but it keeps the low and the high end intact. So with a tube screamer, normally you lose a lot of low and high end. With this, you can get the mid-range in there, but keep kind of the rest of the frequencies of your signal. So this is going to be going on the board as well. So with these additions, obviously some things have to go. So the first pedal coming off is going to be the JHS Crimson Fuzz from the Legends of Fuzz series. This is kind of a Big Muff style pedal, and I'm a big David Gilmour fan, and I got this to kind of help me get those David Gilmour Big Muff type tones, and it does a really good job at that, and I really like this pedal. But I found that I really only use it if I'm playing David Gilmour type stuff. So this is going to come off, but I have a feeling if I go do a blues rock jam, I'll probably pull the compressor off and put this back on. So that's probably going to be a change that kind of happens a lot on this board, is switching between the Crimson and the compressor. The Phase 90 is also going to be coming off for a similar reason. I really only use it if I'm doing kind of David Gilmour type stuff. I'll use it for like the beginning of Breathe in the Air, Shine On You Crazy Diamond. A lot of people will use phasers and stuff for that. But that's really the only thing that I use it for. Unless if I'm doing a stereo wet-dry thing, trying a phaser in your wet amp, but keeping your dry amp without the phaser, that can be a really cool sound too. But again, those are things that I don't really do a whole lot of. So the phaser is going to be coming off as well. I've done a lot of shooting out with the Odie and the other overdrives that you see here on the board, trying to decide what's going to stay, what's going to go. And I'm going to pull off the JHS Andy Timmons pedal and the Full Tone OCD. I love both of these pedals. The Andy Timmons pedal is a killer lead tone, especially with my Les Paul. And with the main circuit and the boost circuit stacked together, it's a killer lead tone. And if I go and do some recording and stuff, I'll probably pull this pedal out and use it. But the way that I like to run gain is I like to stack gain pedals together. And so really for me to use this for a gain tone, if we're kind of building up and I'm coming to a solo, assuming that I've already got one or two drive pedals already on, I would probably have to turn those drive pedals off and then turn this on to get the tone that I want. And so I would rather just add another drive pedal to what I'm already doing to get that tone rather than having to do all that switching around. So that's going to come off. The OCD is also a pedal that has been a mainstay on my board since I got it, and I really love it. I run it different than most people. I run it in low peak mode with the drive all the way off, and it gives a pretty transparent, flat, light overdrive sound, and I really like that. But my feeling is that in a mix, something that has just a little bit of a mid boost in it, or that's kind of sits a little bit differently in the EQ might work a little bit better. I really did a lot of comparing between the OCD and the Charlie Brown, which I can set the Charlie Brown to be pretty flat, but even at that setting, there's just a little something in the mid-range that I think is just gonna help it kick through the mix a little bit. So, especially with my Strat, the Prince of Tone and the OCD stacked together is one of my favorite tones, but I think for this board, at least for now, I'm gonna stick with the Charlie Brown. So what that leaves on the board is I'm gonna have the volume pedal first, and then I'm going to go into the Analog Man Red Dot Sunface, which with the Strat is killer, but there's also some really cool tones in here that you can get with a Les Paul that might even work for some praise and worship stuff. So when I do the tone sampling at the end, once I've done everything, I'll show that. And then I'm going to go into the compressor, and then I am going to go into the blues driver, which I have set. I've kind of found that I can set the blues driver to be very similar in tone to the Prince of Tone in boost mode if I turn the gain down on the blues driver. And I really like that tone, especially with the Les Paul. It doesn't compress quite so much as the overdrive mode on the Prince of Tone, which I really like with the Strat. So I'm going to be using the blues driver. Then I'm going to go into the Prince of Tone. Then I'm going to go into the Od. Then I'm going to go into the Charlie Brown. Then we're going to hit the Boss CE2W, the Wazacraft CE2. Then I'm going to hit the Line 6 HX Stomp, which is going to be doing delays and reverbs. I have the Electro Harmonics Freeze in the effects loop of the HX Stomp, and what that lets me do is I can run the freeze in the effects loop on a different signal path from my main signal path on the Stomp, which means that I can put some delays and reverbs after the freeze. So I can switch to that and have the sound of the freeze go through some delays and reverbs and stuff to kind of create an ambience. And then I can switch back to my main dry signal and play lead stuff over it. So I have the freeze going into the effects loop of the HX Stomp. Then I go into the Dan Electro Fish and Chips EQ pedal, which I'm using to tame the top end of my amp. I have the Tweed Fender Blues Jr. that has the Jensen speaker in it, and there's a really sizzly bright top end on it, especially when you put on overdrive. And so I'm using this EQ pedal to kind of tame that a little bit. And then lastly, I'll go into the Ditto Looper, and then that will go out to my Blues Jr. Obviously too, with the HX Stomp, if I'm in a situation where I need to go direct to house, I can pull up a patch that has some amp and cab modeling on it or some impulse responses, and then I can just come straight out of the HX Stomp to the front of house. And then the only thing that won't be in the chain there would be the Ditto Looper, which I don't really use live. I pretty much just use that to practice, and the EQ, which is basically there just to shape the sound of my amp, which if I'm using amp modeling, I won't need. So I'm gonna go ahead and mount the power, pull everything off, mount the power supply under the board, get everything together, and the next thing you'll see is hopefully me playing and getting some killer tones out of the board. All right, well here it is, all completed and wired up with the True Tone CS12 power supply, powering everything that you see going on the board. You pretty much heard everything there except for the Ditto looper. So just to walk you through everything, I've got the volume pedal here, the VP Junior from Ernie Ball. Control my volume. Then I go into the Analog Man Sun Face. And what I like to do with that is if I stack it with something like the Charlie Brown, if I keep the volume on the guitar or on the volume pedal all the way up, it kind of starts caving in a little bit and is a little muddy. But if I take my volume pedal and just back the volume off just a little bit, it brightens up. So see, right about there, it starts to brighten up, and then you get this really cool kind of overdriven, fuzzy. So it's kind of part fuzz, part overdrive, and I think that's a really cool tone. You can do that with the volume control on your guitar too. So volume pedal here is all the way up. Then if I just back the volume on my guitar off just a tiny bit, so really cool trick to do with fuzzes. Then I go into the DOD compressor, which is doing its thing. Like I said, I like to use that maybe with an ambient type sound. Then I go into the blues driver, which is set as just a really light overdrive. I like that with the net pickup. I'm using my 2018 Gibson Les Paul Tribute. So with the bridge pickup on a humbucker guitar, I really like that sound. It's not super overdriven and it doesn't compress a lot, and I really like that. Then I go into the blues driver, which is going to sound similar. It's just got a little bit more dirt on it and it compresses a little more under the fingers. Then I go into the Shelly Guitars Od. This is the pedal that I'm running at 18 volts. Let me turn that up a little bit. So I don't have a lot of gain on it, and it's just a really clear overdrive. You can really hear all, when you hit a big chord like that, you can really hear all of the strings. And then if I stack it with something like the Prince of Tone, So I really like that sound. It's nice and full, but there's still a lot of definition there. And I think part of that is because the Od there is at 18 volts. Then I go into the JHS Charlie Brown. Which I like to stack, so maybe running like these 3 pedals together with a little bit of delay. So that would probably be a pretty good lead tone. I have on the Helix, sorry, it's my mic cable getting in the way there. On the Helix, I have a dotted 1/8 delay and an 1/8 note delay. And then this switches over to my ambient sound, which is on a separate signal path. So it hits the effects loop first, which has the freeze in it, and then it has a delay with some modulation and then an ambient reverb on it. So I can use it for ambient stuff. But I can also hit a chord and hit the freeze and sustain that chord, and then turn this off and switch back to the other signal path that just has the delays in it and play over the top of it. So I can... And then also on the Helix, I have a tremolo, so... And this little foot switch here is from This One's Mine. It is a combination of a mini fixed expression pedal and a tap tempo pedal, which are both, which runs into the Helix. So the delays and the tremolo are all synced to the tap tempo switch. And then that mini fixed expression pedal is what's turning on and off the tremolo. You can see the fish and chips there doing some EQ, and then the ditto looper up at the top. Here's the CE2. We didn't talk about that. I could see using that with an ambient sound. So that is my updated pedal board. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, put them in the comments and I will do my best to answer. And I hope you have a good day. Bye.